Hi, Year 9. So today we're going to look at the Great Depression and we're going to work through a PowerPoint together, which I will also make available to you on OneNote. And then there's a little task at the end that I would like you to do. So let's have a look now at this PowerPoint. Where's my button? There's my button. And this is in my way. Right, okay. So, the Great Depression is our setting for the novel of Mice and Men, and this is a really iconic image of the itinerant worker, which I'll explain to you shortly. So, during the 1930s, there was the Great Depression. It began in 1929 with the stock market crash, and it lasted throughout the next decade, moving into World War II. So for these 12-ish years, Americans were living really tough lives. It actually spread across the world, but it originated and hit hardest in America. So this was a period of intense economic depression. Many people lost their jobs during this time. In fact, when the Great Depression was at its worst, 1 in 4 people were without a job. And you can see in this image over here, hopefully you're actually being reminded here of history kind of repeating itself, unfortunately, at this time. So we've got people here queuing up for social benefits or assistance because they've lost their jobs, and we know that that's what unfortunately is happening now in the time of coronavirus. So people at that time, a lot of people lost everything that they had, so life was pretty tough. So this saw a rise in itinerant workers. So what is an itinerant worker? They're people who travel from town to town and they're seeking short-term employment. So without a steady job that they can go to, people were having to basically travel around to different towns in order to seek work. Primarily during the 1930s, this was men. They were worked extremely hard. They were effectively homeless. They moved from place to place to find work. They didn't earn much at all. It was really difficult for them to try and accumulate wealth. And they were performing exhausting manual labour, the likes that we see Fred and George. I'm in Harry Potter world. George and Lenny doing in Of Mice and Men, just throwing bales of barley onto the truck or bales of hay onto trucks, working out in the fields. Right. Actually, I'll go back here and you can just see, look, check out this picture here, and you can see this man walking with all of his worldly belongings just slung on his back, walking from place to place. This here is everything this man owns in this sack. So the level of poverty was pretty intense. There was a lot of discrimination in the 1930s. So we've got minority groups such as African Americans, Native Americans, Mexicans, and women facing a lot of prejudice at this time. They were seen as taking jobs from white men who required them at the time. They were hit hardest at this time, and we see the prejudice that some of these minority groups faced in the text. Life just transformed in 1930s America. People were delaying getting married, they were delaying having children, and with all of these men going from place to place trying to find work, a lot of women were left alone with children, abandoned. And look at this stat that I found on the internet. In 1940, 1.5 million women had been abandoned by their husbands during the Great Depression. That's staggering. So women, children were doing it tough, as were other people who were seen as lesser because of the discrimination that they were facing. So you've looked a little bit at what the American dream is, and we can see that the idea of America as the land of opportunity, the land of the free, where a rags to riches story is possible, is really challenged in the time of the Great Depression. Can people create wealth Can they pursue this dream in a society that is crushed by poverty? So, Of Mice and Men is an exploration of that idea. George and Lenny have this beautiful dream to own their own ranch and to be their own bosses, to be independent, but it's doomed to fail because of all of the obstacles that the society at the time is throwing in their way. So that gives us, I'm just going to move myself out of the way, that gives us a rundown of what the Great Depression is. What I would now like you to do is create a PowerPoint presentation. I want you to create a visual narrative of what the Great Depression was like, and I should have used capital letters there, that's not very good. So I want you to go on the internet, I want you to collect images of the Great Depression. On each slide, I would like you to put a caption or like a little description next to it explaining what is going on. So is it itinerant workers are walking to find a job? Is it people are lining outside of the equivalent of Centrelink to get financial aid? Is it that men are in the fields bucking barley, as we've seen? I want at least 6 slides of images that are painting the picture of the Great Depression at that time. Then I want a final 7th slide where I want you to tell me how we see the Great Depression reflected back to us in Of Mice and Men. I want at least 5 dot points of you explaining why or how Steinbeck is creating this particular setting, what is happening in the lives of our characters that is representing those ideas. At the end of the lesson, once you've finished, I want you to upload that onto Simon, please, so I can verify that you have completed it. So just hop into class tasks like you did with your essay and just upload it there, and I can see your submission from there. If you've got any questions, make sure that you email me. I'll be available during our lesson time. Hopefully that's fairly straightforward and you learn a little bit more about the Great Depression. All right, thanks guys, enjoy.